Okay, so what I'll do is introduce soldering and some of the tools that you'll probably need when soldering. Now the first thing is the soldering iron, so that's the iron there, and what you're going to look for is the tip that is not too sharp and not too blunt. The sharper it is, the less heat you get to the tip, and the blunter it is, then you end up with heat everywhere and you make a mess. So I think if you can find one that looks like that, that's quite a good angle. It's about 15 degrees. Okay, now you won't always have this sort of wire in here that I'm using to clean. It looks like that, but you should really try and get some sort of wet sponge or paper towel in there, and that just cleans the tip. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a lot cleaner now. You want to try and keep that clean. Okay, so there's your soldering iron, and if you're using half decent setup, you'll be able to control the temperature. Normally it's a bit melted, but we try and keep things to 450. Okay, and that ensures that you're going to heat up the solder, and that is the solder, quickly. You do need to make sure though that your heat's not too high, because you might end up melting or damaging the components. And what you're looking for is the hot spot on the soldering iron. Now most irons have a hot spot, and that is just the place where it prefers to melt. So you can see it's not as good as that one. Now, if you've got any spots there where the solder is not sticking to, that means that you've got a dirty iron, so you want to clean that. Okay, so there's the solder iron, and the power. And it's called a solder syringe. So how you do that is, let's say you've made a big mess, push that down, stick that end on the mess end, heat it up and suck that through. We've got side cutters. These are used for cutting legs and wire, and of course strippers, wire strippers. And the way these work is you've got wire, it's called lead wire, and you put that, squeeze it, and it just takes out the outer, the insulation of the wire, and then you're going to twist that. Now try and make it a habit that every time you strip a wire, you do twist, and then you can put it in these clamps. These are called helping hands if you've got shaky hands. And then what you'll do is you're going to just tin the wire. Now the way we do it, you use the soldering iron to heat up the wire, and you put the solder onto the hot wire. No other way. Don't heat this up like take the solder, smear it on the iron, and then try and wipe it on, because you're not going to get a decent fuse. So find that hot spot, and we're just going to heat up the wire. Don't know if you can see that. Let me just zoom in. So we take the iron, we're going to heat up the wire, and you can see now the solder is fusing to the wire. Now obviously for the camera I put a little bit too much solder on there just so you could see it. But the point of doing that is, well, first of all, it's not going to fray and it's not going to split apart, fall apart. The next part is, I've already got solder on here, so if I wanted to solder it to something else, well, I don't need to add any more solder because it's already on here. Okay, what you're most likely going to be doing, not all the time, but most likely, you're going to be soldering to circuit boards. Okay, so it's like a printed circuit board. You've got the track there, which has sort of been printed on. When we're making these, we actually use a machine that will cut an isolation cut around the track. The tracks all have a terminal point at the beginning and the end, or throughout, and they've got a hole as well. Now the way it works is the component goes on this side through to that side, and then you solder it on. Now I'm going to do two types of soldering. I'm going to do a bad solder I'm going to do a good solder. So you can see the difference, because there is a difference. One works and one doesn't. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Let's have an LED. So an LED, I don't know what kit this is, to be honest. Some sort of switch. Okay, so the LED, now eventually you'll learn that these are polarized, which means that there's got to be one side that goes positive and one side goes negative. Okay, so I'm actually going to find the symbol. Now the symbol for the LED in this case is that one there, and don't you worry about that. And I know that that leg is negative, that leg is positive, and we're going to put that through the holes like this. Now it's good practice to try and keep your components as flush or as far down onto the circuit as possible. However, sometimes you want them to protrude so that you can see them or access them. I don't like that, but for in this example I'm going to leave this sticking out so that I can reuse it afterwards. And when it goes through, again, good practice, just splay the leg out slightly so that it doesn't fall out. Okay, so you can see that I've just moved those aside. Alright, now the correct way of doing this is you get the soldering iron and you're going to heat up the track or the pad, which is that copper thing there, and you're going to heat up the leg at the same time. And whilst you're heating that, you're going to, of course, with the other hand, put the solder into the middle and you're going to watch the solder fuse. You'll get a nice flow. Alright, so for this I'm going to need my helping hands just to hold everything in place as I attempt to solder. Now, the wrong way obviously is to wipe the solder. We don't want to wipe it. And of course, the best way is to do what I just said, and that is heat both of them up. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm only going to heat up the leg. I'm not going to heat up the track because I've made an accident. I've done it by accident, let's say. And then I'm going to add the solder to it. Okay, I've added the solder to it. Now I'm going to do it properly. So I'm actually going to heat up the track and the leg at the same time. I'm done. One of these is a dry joint. Now dry means that it's not actually connected properly. At the moment I know that that is fused onto the leg because that's the only thing I heated up. This one, however, that looks like a cone. So what's happening is it's fused onto the track and it's moved up. So solder syringe, prepare the solder syringe by pushing that in and getting the click. Heat it up. When it's hot, just click that. Once you've soldered, you don't want to you want to short circuit your wires. So we normally trim these wires off with the side cutters, and that stops all the wires from touching because there's going to be loads and loads of legs.